It's time for Hostel Discourse. Here's your host, David Rohlfing.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Hostel Discourse. We have a very exciting episode here in episode 21. We will be discussing Blade Runner 2049 as well as another debate question, which is, which person from human history would you choose to accompany you in first contact with an alien species? So staying on the sci-fi theme, that one's kind of inspired by Arrival, one of the best movies of 2016. But to start off, before we get into our Blade Runner discussion, let me introduce you to tonight's crew. First with us, my oldest brother from St. Louis, Missouri, Mike Rohlfing. Welcome back.
Hi, thank you very much.
And back again, Canaan Smith from Colorado Springs, or should I call him Osui?
What's up, everybody?
And back again, Joe Kuiper from Oklahoma City.
Hello, everybody.
Hello, Joe.
Hello.
Agent K.
Yes.
Okay, so we've all seen Blade Runner 2049, directed by Denis Villeneuve, who is known for Arrival, Sicario, and Prisoners, most of all. This movie was a sequel to the 1982 sci-fi classic Blade Runner, starring Harrison Ford. This installment has Ryan Gosling as Agent K, Harrison Ford as Rick Deckard, Ana de Armas as Joy, and Jared Leto as Neander Wallace. And I'll read a brief summary just to give you an idea of the movie if you haven't seen it. A young Blade Runner's discovery of a long-buried secret leads him to track down former Blade Runner Rick Deckard, who's been missing for 30 years. So that's a very high-level summary. Let's go through our overall thoughts on the movie, kind of a spoiler-free review before we get into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie, you can still listen in for a couple minutes, then I'll put in the show notes when we start getting into spoilers. So I know, Canaan, you've been excited to talk about this, so how about we start with you and your high-level review of the movie?
Yeah, so I thought the movie was awesome. It was definitely an experience from start to finish that had me on the edge of my seat, and I was like really gripping. I was like even gripping and clutching at certain points just out of sheer suspense. As far as visual appeal of the movie, it is incredible. Just everything that you're looking at is so beautiful and dystopian, and such a reflection of what may come if humanity doesn't, get our act together, which I love to see in science fiction. I think it's one of the greatest things about science fiction. And as far as the music and sound design went, I was like completely blown away. And hands down, great movie from start to finish.
Very good. Mike, what'd you think?
So the original Blade Runner movie was one of those movies I tried to watch like 10 times and never finished. I eventually recently tried. It's just like, I don't know. It's one of those that just like, you got to be in the right mood, and it doesn't really make sense and not a lot happens. But anyway, I finally did watch that recently because I knew I wanted to see this new one. And I really did enjoy it. It's very long. It's very slow. It's a slow burner, but at the same time, it's very beautiful. And there's always something interesting to look at. The performances are very good. As Canaan said, the music and sound design was incredible. I did really enjoy it. I can't say I loved it, but I do think it's something that I want to revisit. Maybe watch it with like the subtitles so I can understand everything they're saying and really grasp everything that's going on. Because it's one of those that you really can watch a number of times and pick up something new every time. So as a whole, I enjoyed it. It's not like my favorite movie of all time, but it was really cool.
Joe, what'd you think? I know every Hostel bro knows that your actor lookalike is Ryan Gosling. So is it just looking in a mirror, a robot version of yourself?
Yeah, it was a little trippy, especially when he revealed, well, I don't know if I should say that yet, but you can pull this out later if you want to, but when he revealed that his name was Joe in the movie, and they were like, yeah, your name's Joe. And I was like, what? So that was definitely trippy. But my rating, I would say it was a really good movie. Definitely not like my favorite movie ever, but it was really good. And I had just watched the original Blade Runner only 3 days before for the first time. So now I understand why people wear like trench coats and have the weird pistol little gun at like Halloween and Comic-Con and stuff. I'd seen that before and never understood it, but now I get it. And I really enjoyed the original Blade Runner, and I thought that this was a really good follow-up. We'll get more into why later, but the music, the cinematography and everything were great. It did get a little slow, and being like almost a 3-hour movie was a little much for me, and there were times where I was like, when are they going to wrap this up? But as a whole, it was a good movie.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with you, Joe. I also saw the original Blade Runner just a few days for the first time before I saw this one. Yeah, that movie, I don't know, like neither of these movies are my favorite ever, but there's something about them that's kind of like so different that it makes it such a good overall kind of piece of artwork. And I think the music adds to that a lot, and the mood. They're both kind of like a film noir type movie where it's just like a slow burn mystery, darker tone, rainy scenery, dystopian future. Yeah, I like the movie. There are some things, more plot details that I didn't enjoy as much, but the other aspects of the movie, production, I thought were great as far as cinematography, soundtrack, sound effects, and some of the kind of themes of humanity they touched upon in a unique way I thought were pretty cool. But I'd agree with you, Mike, that seeing it a second time would be good. Not anytime in the near future since it's so long, but maybe in a few months when I don't remember it as well, I'll revisit it and we'll be able to catch some more details. From here, I guess we can get into spoilers. I know there's a lot to talk about because it was a long movie. So if you haven't seen it, I would skip to the debate, but let's get into it.
Can I ask a question real quick?
Yeah.
Did any of you guys see the Blackout 2020 anime that ties together the original Blade Runner, or it talks about the blackout that happens right after the original Blade Runner movie?
No, I didn't watch any of those short films.
Okay, so those were really very interesting. It was a series of 3 short films done in anime style by the same animator that did Cowboy Bebop, who the name is slipping me. But it was an amazing kind of context to the movie, and it did a lot for telling how the world got to the state where it was from the original Blade Runner. And I just think it was such a it's very interesting to have that be a part of this movie, you know, and I'm surprised that no one else has seen it.
Though the mention of the blackout made me want to go print out all my pictures.
Yeah, seriously.
Yeah, I had heard of that anime before, but I don't know. Since I just saw the original recently, I never got a chance to watch that. But that does sound interesting, kind of filling in those gaps in between the movies. Is that anime very similar, like mood-wise, as the 2 movies are?
It is. It's very... Yeah, it's kind of the same feeling, but the fact that it's an anime kind of automatically sets it apart. One thing that I will say is when I saw Blade Runner 2020 Blackout, which I think was just actually released like recently to kind of go along with 2049, but when I saw that, I was kind of hoping that, or wishing that 2049 was going to be a feature-length anime movie, but after I saw the movie, I was glad that, you know, obviously.
And just to clarify, there are 3 short films that take place on 3 different years, and 2 of them are actually live action, I believe. Did you watch all 3 of them? You just watched the one?
No, I just watched the anime.
Okay, because I think one of them has Bautista in it, and the other one has Jared Leto. So I'd be curious to watch them as well.
Oh, yeah.
So when did those come out?
Like in September. Yeah, mid-September.
That's very interesting.
I should probably watch those. I'm pulling them up right now, and they look pretty cool.
So for context, the blackout, because I didn't fully understand it, basically everything, I mean, they lost all their electronics, basically, and then Wallace kind of saved the day.
They tried to cause a blackout because they were being hunted. So they wanted to wipe the drive so that they wouldn't have the information of who was a replicant or not anymore.
Okay, that's smart.
Very smart.
Yeah, that kind of makes more sense. The beginning of the movie, Dave Bautista kind of like hiding as a farmer, how he would be able to survive that long without being found. What did you guys think of the overall plot? So obviously there's a lot of focus on him and his AI lover, wife, whatever you want to call it, Joy. I was surprised how much they focused on that. A lot of people are comparing it to Her. relationship with an AI.
Semi-comparable, but also totally different.
And then from there, I guess main plot points, Jared Leto's character finding out that Rachel had a baby. He's trying to take that baby so that he can take the reproductiveness from it and create more replicants that can reproduce, because he wants his replicants to take over the world, even though he's human. But I guess he's kind of bionic in some ways. I
think his motivation is to build a workforce to have like world domination.
I guess we can talk about his character a little bit. Yeah. I found his character to be kind of weak as like the main villain, which is he's kind of set up as the main villain. I don't know, especially like the resolution of his character, there was none at the end of the movie. You don't know what happened to him when Deckard found his daughter, and that is just left completely alone. So I don't know if they're trying to set up a sequel with him or something, but that was something that I did not like about the plot. There is no resolution there.
So, okay, real quick, just to touch on the comparison between to her, you know, a human in a relationship with an artificial intelligence would be one thing, but now you're talking about a potential replicant who's having a relationship with a computer. So it's like there's this whole other dynamic to it that's kind of like they are the same thing in a way. So they would be attracted to each other. Like I can see how that would happen more realistically than maybe in her, but I can see the comparison, obviously.
Yeah, one of the weirdest foreplay sex scenes I've ever seen.
It was really interesting, though. All the stuff with her and the visuals they created with her, where she was like partly transparent, and the way the light was shining through, and then obviously the scene where she kind of merged with the prostitute was, I mean, it was very, very well done. It was bizarre, but it was oddly kind of beautiful in a way as well.
That was probably the thing I was most impressed with in this movie, was how they captured her AI as a hologram. I mean, from the first scene where they kind of go outside after he gets the like portable device, and you see it in the rain, and you can like see through her, and she like, you know, materializes rain on her hands. And then to the scene, to the sex scene, and then also the scene where she starts glitching outside of the car. And you like see her kind of jolty. I thought everything they did with the AI was very impressive.
And I loved when they were outside and he was about to kiss her or whatever, and then she just freezes.
Oh yeah,
that was so great, because you can totally
that
picture
was like a dagger in the heart,
that happening in the not too distant future. And if there would be problems just the way there are with our computers today.
Well, didn't he get like a phone call or something? So it's like, how many times have you been like talking to your girlfriend or like in the middle of some awesome moment, and then your mom calls you and boom.
Yeah, it was definitely a kind of a jab at everyone has their phones on them all the time, and it's not going to change in the future. It's just going to be more unavoidable having wearable technology or AI or whatever.
Brutal.
I was a little bit disappointed in how they killed her off by destroying the portable device because he wiped it from his apartment, but it was just so brief, and that was such a big part of his character, and then he didn't take any time to reflect on her death at all, and then they just didn't touch upon that at all anymore.
Yeah, so obviously Blade Runner kind of as a whole has this big theme about what makes us human, and at what point do AIs or replicants, like fake humans, like what makes you human, and how do you become human or have a soul or whatever. So I thought like having her in there as an AI, and then she died, and then after that he sees that large version of her, because Joy is just kind of a home program. Like he sees that, and it's kind of like, yeah, there's other versions of her out there, but could he ever get that back? Like, can you save her memories? Was she really in love with him? That kind of stuff I thought was kind of an important point in the movie. Yeah, right there. That's her.
My background is the giant version of Joy pointing at K.
Nice.
That moment. Okay, so when everything you want to see, everything you want to hear is popping up, and he's kind of reflecting on the fact that he was in love with this AI who's really just this big this version of it's just an ad. He's just in love with an ad, and he has been forever. That is a reoccurring theme, as Joe is talking about. Is also another reoccurring theme is this kind of like instant gratification type society where everyone is getting everything that they want instantly. They can buy AI and have it be your significant other with no effort. And what type of, what type of society would that lead to? Well, it would lead to one that's like entirely disconnected. I think it's portrayed very well. And that scene hits really hard.
And I think also in general, the technology was really interesting because it's like this Blade Runner alternate universe. They took, and when the movie was made, the original movie was made in the 80s, it was sort of like their ideal, like how would the 80s technology evolve in their mind, and then this was like an evolution of that evolution, if that makes sense. Like there was still a lot of analog stuff. There was still a lot it wasn't like they took today's technology in 2018 and advanced it to 2049. It was, they took the 80s version of 2019 and advanced that to 2049, which I thought was really interesting. Sort of the overall technology in the movie and the way that they decided to go with that.
Yeah, that seems to kind of be a common theme in dystopian sci-fi future movies. Like the technology advances that we're seeing in real life today are all information advances over the internet and stuff. But movies always make it like not like that. I don't know. It's more like transportation advances and like energy. Yeah, it's kind of hard. It's like they keep analog technology.
Which we could be right on the verge of those types of changes as well.
It's like Star Wars. They put all their focus in traveling light speed, but then they didn't put any focus on quality and communication. They just have blurry holograms.
Yeah,
the little comm links.
Yeah, and they can't look anything up because there's no internet.
That's really funny. Holy cow, there's no internet in Star Wars.
What did you think of the sound effects / soundtrack?
It was
spot on.
Hypnotic.
A lot of the music reminded me of the Anakin Palpatine. Have you heard of the tragedy?
Yeah, the opera scene.
The space opera. It's like bassy, kind of like...
Have you heard the story of Darth Plagueis the Wise?
A lot of distortion, a lot of... I was in a theater with some pretty good sound, unlike Rogue One, which we talked about a year ago. Yeah, I mean, the room was shaking, like, in a good way a lot of the time. It really created this atmosphere and this aura. Like, it's just kind of this movie you just kind of had to sit and just vibe with. Kind of seems like Canaan's kind of movie.
Yeah, I was completely entranced the entire way through simply because of the music and the visuals alone. There were total plot issues and all sorts of stuff that a lot of people have been bringing up that I have, when I think about it, I'm like, holy shit, I wasn't even thinking about that, just because I was completely entranced with this soundtrack. I mean, Hans Zimmer was involved.
Yep.
They used a CS80 Yamaha synth clone, which is a classic 80s synthesizer, been used on countless movies. Yeah, I was like, the transitions between scenes and the music alone were enough to like keep me completely entranced.
There were some songs, I can't remember which parts or which scenes they're in. It was like kind of oppressive music, like so loud you like couldn't not notice it. I forget when they used that, but I think maybe like walking through some of the streets just kind of to create like the chaotic feel. But there's some like really oppressive tunes in there, which I noticed, which were very different. I hadn't really heard in a movie before.
I noticed them the most in when he goes to Vegas and it's that weird like ash cloud. They played a lot of like heavy synth there in like a beat form. But that actually reminded me of when he's walking through the dusty Las Vegas and he sees the bees. Does anyone know like the significance of that or like why those are there?
Well, I saw something online because there's also a part, I'm going to get confused, but when he's on like Bautista's planet and it's like wherever he is and they find that flower, he finds that flower by the tree.
Yeah.
There's like, maybe Harrison Ford was like growing flowers and so he had bees and he actually visited Bautista's house and left that flower behind at the grave or whatever.
Okay.
That was like something that I read. That I did not connect that when I was watching the movie, but it's like, because the bees were in Vegas, correct? You said that?
Yeah.
Yeah, so like maybe Harrison Ford had this beehive so that he could grow flowers, and I don't know. There was something like that. Speaking of Vegas, that sequence in the nightclub, in the virtual nightclub with the Elvis Presley going crazy was like, I mean, to just conceive of that, but then to pull it off the way they did, that was That was that was very, talk about oppressive, but that was oppressive and impressive, that sequence was. I'm trying to think of like some other scenes that come to mind. I mean, the opening scene with Bautista was brutal and really well done. And that guy's a good actor. I know he's like,
considering he came from WWE.
Yeah. And then to what's his character in Guardians? Drax. He's fine in that. He plays such a stupid character. And then Spectre was Spectre. The movie was terrible, but he did a really good job. I wish there was more of him, which I guess there is in one of those short films, so I'm going to have to watch that.
Mm-hmm. What did you think of the use of Harrison Ford and how late in the movie they introduced him?
I mean, they could never have done this, but it would have been so much better if we did not know he was in that movie.
Yeah.
Like, he was in every poster, he's in every trailer, but he didn't show up till like 2 hours in. That would have been the twists of all twists, surprises of all surprises if they could have pulled that off, but I guess can't always do that.
But also he ended up being kind of the focal point of the plot. We thought Ryan Gosling would be, and then at the end it was kind of like, oh, just kidding.
That's one thing that I actually really, really appreciated about this movie. It's probably the thing that I appreciate the most about this movie is that the entire time it seems pretty hero's journey-ish. You're following Kay. He's on his journey. He's the guy. He's the guy in the dream. He's Decker's child. And then, boom, there's this scene where he's kneeled down and he's on the ground, and they say that, you're not special. It's not you. And right away, the hero's journey is taken off course. And that, to me, was like, I was kind of blown away, because I was like, I got this movie figured out. I know exactly where it's going. I know what's happening. And boom, that was awesome.
Yeah, it was pretty refreshing that they didn't go the typical route.
The classic structured route. It is still structured, though. I mean,
very sad when you think about it. He lost his girlfriend. He thought he was special and the first child replicant, and then he died, or we can assume he bled out on those steps, maybe not, but yeah, he had a pretty tragic story in the movie by the end of it.
But at least he he was able to believe in this alternate reality for a little while, which is probably better than most replicants. And he at least convinced himself for a little while that he was special.
And at the end of the day, he accomplished something, he did
accomplish something, right?
And I think that's a pretty big thing for any replicant.
But what did he accomplish? What is the significance of Deckard finding his daughter?
I don't know.
Are they... This is my biggest problem with the movie. Are they going to now go with the army, the rebellion that told Joe that he wasn't special, and fight the humans? But at the same time, it seems like Jared Leto's character would be on the same side as that rebellion, because he's the one that wants to take over the world using the replicants. It seems like all the replicants are on the same side with that little rebellion that they show for a couple minutes in that one scene. So what is the significance of Deckard finding his daughter, and what are they going to do next? I have no clue.
Good question.
Yeah, it's happy for Deckard that he found his daughter, but why does it matter for everybody else? I don't think it does.
That was kind of why when he first meets the rebellion people and the lady says he should go kill Deckard, they didn't tell him to go save Deckard. He just kind of did. The lady specifically was like, you need to kill him so he can't reveal where the girl is, or who his daughter is,
Oh, because then they might find...
I think the rebellion is most interested in the fact that there's a replicant who can reproduce. And I don't think they really cared about Deckard. That's kind of what I got out of it.
It's like Children of Men.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've discovered the 3 movies that led to the conception of Blade Runner 2049.
What? Her, Children of Men,
and the original Blade Runner.
And Force Awakens, because we got Harrison Ford playing another regretful sci-fi father.
True.
And he did it really well. He did a really good job. That ending scene with him was very well acted. He actually looked like he cared, maybe.
Yeah, I was more impressed with his acting in this movie than The Force Awakens by far.
Well, they didn't reveal whether or not he was a replicant. That was the main cliffhanger at the end of the original. I thought that was interesting.
Oh, and if you count Kingdom of the Crystal Skull as sci-fi, that's the third. It's the third movie of regretful sci-fi father.
Yeah.
It basically is sci-fi.
That one basically is sci-fi, yeah, pretty much.
Let's wrap up with our number rating. What would you give the movie out of 5 stars? Joe?
I'll go 3.9. That was pretty good.
Mike?
I'm pulling up my Letterboxd app to see what I gave it immediately following. I gave it a 3, but I would definitely want to watch it again.
Canaan?
I'm going to go... So, here's my attitude is kind of like, I'm in or I'm out, and I'm in on this movie, so I'll just go ahead and give it a 5.
Woo!
It's a fun movie, and it's perfect for someone who wants to... I want to see a 3-hour movie. I want to see a 5-hour movie. To be honest, I don't know why we don't make 10-hour movies. But yeah, I loved that movie. I really
Those are
did.
Netflix TV shows nowadays.
Yeah, well, yeah. See, that's the thing. It's just like, okay, you just don't want to leave your bed to watch it. I get it, but
Yeah.
Either way, I think it's definitely worth checking out on the biggest screen and the best sound system you can find. I would definitely recommend seeing it in a theater and not waiting till it comes out on Redbox.
I would second that, and I think I would give it 3.6 out of 5. So in between Mike and Joe,
Fair.
but way behind Canaan, I guess.
like I said, all or
He's
nothing.
in. He's all in.
All or nothing.
Yeah, it takes me a while for a movie to work its way up my list, so I certainly would like to see it again.
Well, I'm
and
not
kinda
saying
take it in
that.
again.
I'm just saying that I just gave it a little 5-star rating. I'll hand out 5 stars all day, baby. Netflix, 5 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars.
Do all 8 Star Wars movies
Or
get
I guess
5
Netflix
stars?
is just up or down, right?
Netflix botched the rating system a while ago.
Oh, okay. Would I give all 8 Star Wars movies 5 stars?
Yeah.
Hell yeah, of course I would.
Even Attack of the Clones.
Even
Even Attack of the Clones,
can-
holy shit.
You can
There's
in
so
your
much
right
bad
mind
stuff
give
in that
5
movie.
stars.
That is
It's
so bad.
bad.
Hey,
You can still like a
like I
movie
said,
that you
all or
rate
nothing.
poorly.
All or nothing. No, if I really had to critically look at the movies, of course I could rate them. Okay, do you want me to critically rate Blade Runner really quick?
Sure.
I'd probably give it like a 4.2.
We pried it out of him, the truth.
That's probably
4.2.
fair.
Okay. That's more reasonable.
That's pretty good though still.
Yep. Okay. Well, Mike, we'll probably see you in December for one of the Star Wars episodes, I'm sure. So thanks for stopping by, and we appreciate your professional opinion on all movies.
Oh, you're welcome. I don't know if I could call it that, but you can call it whatever you want.
All right. It's time to move on to the debates. And now let's welcome in Jared Cozart, straight out of the Hostel in Tulsa, Oklahoma.
Hey, gang.
And Jacob Hunter, also in Tulsa.
Hello, everybody.
They are here for the debate. And I'll remind you of the question real quick. It is, which person from human history would you choose to accompany you in first contact with an alien species? So Jared will be the judge for this debate. The rest of us will be arguing our individual picks. But before we get into it, we had 2 social media responses on this question. Red Brick Chris, friend of the show on Instagram, said Ender Wiggins.
Yes,
I believe is
from Ender's Game.
it's from the Ender game, but that wouldn't count because we're talking real people, not fictional characters. So
Good
sorry,
choice,
Chris.
though.
Stupid
Good choice.
answer.
Stupid Chris.
And then Noah Roberts, also another good friend of the show. Steve Jobs, hands down. That was his response.
He's such a homer.
Ooh.
Very bad idea. Very bad idea.
So, Jared, I'll hand it over to you from here, and you can dictate the order of things for the debate.
All right, boys. Welcome to the courtroom. Let's start with opening statements as usual. 30 seconds to a minute, please. And how about from right to left on my screen, Joe, start us off.
Here's the thing about aliens. When you meet them, there's no knowing what you're going to be interacting with. So for my person, I'll give you the lowdown on how I researched him. I actually typed into Google, who are the world's best Renaissance men? Because I want someone who is very diverse in what they can do. And in that research, I found my boy, Story Musgrave, who is an astronaut, physician, and Marine, and who basically has a large track record with both NASA, the military, and education in general. And I'll get more into his background later, but that's my pick.
Excellent, Joe. Thank you. Jacob, what you got?
I've got someone prepared. That is the name of the game when you are meeting the eventual extraterrestrial species. Noam Chomsky is my candidate's name. He is most known as actually a figure of computer science, although he is primarily a linguist. He's also a philosopher, cognitive scientist, historian, social critic, political activist. Most importantly, he is prepared. He is a forward thinker, and I think he has a very specific worldview that would serve us best as a level-minded representative when we're trying to make that first real contact with the species.
Okay, Noam Chomsky. Got it. Who's next? Big D, what you got?
I got Neil deGrasse Tyson. He is my pick to take with me to meet this unknown alien species. He is an astrophysicist, an author, a science communicator, and I think that this combination of career choices and things that he's accomplished and been rewarded for is the perfect combination for someone that you want to take to try to communicate with aliens, to try to understand the foreign nature in which they speak or the foreign nature in which they have advanced in technology or travel through space. And I think that Neil deGrasse would focus on the good of humanity and be able to understand complex problems that you would encounter in those discussions or communications with aliens. So that is why I chose Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Okay, thank you, Big D. Canaan, last but not least. Oh, it's so good.
While you all have brought up very good choices that I could probably not bring up any negatives against any of the people you brought up, but you guys are assuming a lot about how these aliens will communicate, not only how they have communicated, but how they've gotten here and how they've acquired their advanced technology. And I believe that inevitably that would have been through the evolution of consciousness, and we would need someone who could communicate in the best way possible and represent all elements of universal consciousness, at least to humanity's understanding, in a completely universally recognizable way. And the only way that that is possible at this point is through music. So my choice is inevitably John Williams.
Wow, fascinating. Good stuff, everybody. All right, time for rebuttals / expansions on your opening statement. So in any order you want, expand on your pick if you want, or go ahead and jump right into taking down other people's. It's up to you guys at this point.
Canaan, you say that we're making a jump. We're making a jump in assuming the consciousness of the aliens or how they communicate. You're also making just as big of a jump, if not bigger, to say that music is going to be their primary form of communication.
That's not what he said.
I'm not saying it's their primary form of communication. I'm saying it would be universally recognizable and something that we could communicate to them right away, right off the bat. Hey, we create this. This is something that we do. You're not trying to get all analytical on them. You're not trying to bring them the answers to all our questions. You're showing them, hey, we have the capacity to speak in this universal language as humanity. And then that opens the door to all of these other discussions, which if we can even go to those discussions, who knows? It could be, it's straight out of Close Encounters of the Third Kind. It could be left at that type of communication.
Is this pick inspired by Ferry Corsten's album Blueprint?
I was not specifically thinking about that album when I made the pick, but that's a great example of modern fiction. That there's plenty of examples in fiction where aliens communicate through tones, vibrations. Music is what we have that would be translatable to those types of beings.
I am interested in why Joe...
No one else even got any response?
Well, I think that's a creative answer. I feel like the right answer is Neil deGrasse Tyson. He was the director of the Hayden Planetarium because he was inspired as a child when he went to that very planetarium to become an astrophysicist, to become an expert on space. Quote, I feel this deep sense of duty that I serve in the same capacity for people who came through the facility today that others served for me. This was his first job outside of school, and I feel like that quote kind of exemplifies how he gives back to the community. He wants other people to learn about space and to learn about all the mysteries that the universe holds. He's written books on black holes and astrophysics and other topics that it's hard for a normal person to comprehend. On top of that, he's hosted several TV shows and radio shows. He's very charismatic and a very good communicator. So he's known for being able to communicate complex topics in a simple form to normal audiences. And I feel like he'd be able to use those skills in order to communicate with the aliens. And maybe they don't speak English. Probably don't.
Maybe they don't.
Actually, definitely they don't speak English.
Not.
But he would be able to find out a way to communicate with them. And he has a lot more knowledge about the universe, which is where... Yes, Canaan.
You know what he'd probably do? He'd probably call John Williams.
Do you have a rebuttal, David?
No, he would not call John Williams. He wouldn't use music. The aliens might absolutely hate the music and think that it's a weapon trying to destroy them. So that's a.
Oh, that is.
What if the aliens can't hear? What if that is not one of their senses? I mean, we can talk all day about like communicating with aliens, but what if their senses are just different than ours? What if they only communicate through touch or visual sensation, you know?
Whoa.
So how does your pick communicate that way,
I'm
Joe?
so glad you asked. Look, my pick is based on a few suppositions. One is the method in which we're going to interact with these people. So number one, we're going to go to them. And number two, they're going to come to us. Under the first scenario, what do you want if you're going to go to the aliens who are probably off the planet?
Oil.
Well, you're going to need an astronaut. And that's why my boy Story Musgraves is the guy. All right. He's been on 6 flights or 6 space missions, I guess is what I would call them. Smarter people would call them something else probably. But he's basically gone to space 6 times, got a lot of experience, and he's the guy you want on a spacecraft. And the second scenario is that they come to us, in which case, hopefully, they have done research on us enough to the point where either A, they can communicate with us, or B, it's just too difficult for them to communicate with us with our language, in which case, why would you need a linguist or a musician? And it's probably out of the realm of our understanding. So those are the 2 scenarios where I think, one, in which case it doesn't matter if you have a linguist or not, or a musician. And number 2, you need an astronaut, so why not have Story Musgraves?
Not that I can't imagine it. I just don't think it's possible that there is a situation where an interstellar race can get to Earth and not use text-to-speech on Microsoft Word. I think it's out of the realm of possibility to say that these aliens physically can't communicate with us.
Text to speech.
So yeah, you think inevitably if another...
what I mean to say is, if you're saying like aliens might not have maybe they don't have the vocal cords, well, they'll probably have maybe appendages they can type out on a screen, and maybe that can be the way that we are teaching them language. Or maybe they don't have that. They have there's ways to communicate for any limit of the senses that we have ever come across. I would like to use that as my refutation of Joe's latter supposition, in that there's just no way that they could get to Earth and us not be able to get through the barrier of even being able to communicate.
My point is that if they do come to Earth, for instance, if we first saw life on another planet, the first thing we would do would be to study it with either visual or by trying to pick up their radio waves or something. And through that, I think that you would try to interpret their language to the point where when you do go there, you can communicate with them. And I think that's what they would do if they are such a higher intelligence species. I think that they would kind of understand our language and try to interact with us on our own playing field.
That's true. That is true.
Which is why I don't think you need a linguist.
No, now you've already lost me. We were so close, Joe. I think I'll use this little section of the discussion to talk about Noam Chomsky because he changed the game in linguistics in that he basically quantified languages. He's most well known, at least in my personal experience, from his hierarchy of languages, the Chomsky hierarchy. If maybe you're familiar, it is an organization of all possible languages based on what types of grammars they have. Regular grammars, context-free, context-sensitive, all these kinds of things. And he was huge in developing this. And on a somewhat interesting side note, it is a huge part of compiler construction, a matter that I am now more familiar than I ever hoped to be. It's a more than just a linguistic idea. It's a very technical, I guess, technological concept. It has a lot to do with computing and automata theory even. So I hope that I can convince you all right now that through his research and the papers that he's written, he's basically proved that if it's a language, not music. Music is not a language. If it has like the things that a language has, like a grammar and certain structures to it, it just can be solved. And so my argument, I'm kind of taking a stand here that there's just there's no way we can't eventually communicate with these guys. The one person that's going to be on the forefront of this and the best guy to have on our side, it's Noam Chomsky, because he's the guy that basically wrote the book.
So, okay. With this right away, I get his whole entire... I get the universal grammar thing, or I don't get it by any means, but I understand that he has solved it and figured out that he can decipher any known language. But I think that we're dealing with entirely unknowns. We're dealing with something that is entirely unknown. There could be no physical senses. There could be extra like psychic senses, and I'm just saying music is like one thing. It isn't a language. You're right. It's one thing that it doesn't inherently have any meaning or emotion, but it's something that we can all feel.
Okay, so my follow-up question is, why would you actually send John Williams? Because his music, his most powerful music, probably has already been written. Why don't you just send someone with a more qualified background with his music on an iPod?
That's a great question, and my answer to that question would be, there is a certain understanding of the universe that comes with the creation of art. And someone like John Williams, who has created the most brilliant masterpieces of music that, well, arguably, that, you know, have been conceived, and a lot of them that have to do with stuff that is, you know, extraterrestrial or otherwise, I think that he would have an inherent understanding and knowledge of the inner space required to communicate with these beings that are potentially from outer space, but if they are from outer space, are they actually from anywhere else than the inner space?
Whoa, indeed. Well, question time. I got some questions for everybody. Let's stay on Canaan for now. This is something I was interested in. You kind of answered this question as you were talking.
Well, then why ask it?
Because it's important. It's important. He kind of answered it. My question was, does music have inherent qualities or emotions that everybody will feel? And you answered that. You said, no, it doesn't have inherent qualities. So then the follow-up question is, how can you be sure that the music that John plays for these people, or for these aliens, will convey the emotion you want it to convey? Like a nice major chord to humans that sounds to like Americans sounds nice and peaceful and pretty, and that could sound like terrifying to an alien. So how can you know that you're going to convey the right emotion or whatever you want to convey to this music?
So the way that I can say with a slight amount of confidence that John Williams would be able to portray something in the right way is because each note is connected to a frequency. Each note is literally a wavelength that interacts with other notes in a harmonious or dissonant way. If these aliens are they're appearing in our physical reality, they're in they're in the third dimension and they're on Earth, or we're in the third dimension on another planet and we're visiting them, they would be on the same types of frequency system that we would have, that we would know and that we would be familiar with. And I believe that they would still find, just based on the frequency structures alone, the same types of music appealing. Now, that's to say, there's a lot of different types of stuff that is appealing, and yes, some people are even into dissonance, and John Williams can create and sum all of that up into one piece of music, and he can do it masterfully.
Okay, interesting. David, let's go to you next. In your opening statement, you mentioned that Neil deGrasse Tyson would, I'm not sure exactly, you used the phrase good of humanity. I'd like you to expand on how he would contribute to the good of humanity beyond the other three.
Yeah, so I read that quote kind of as an example of how he started off his career kind of wanting to serve the people. He wanted kids to grow up going to the planetarium and to learn about space and to learn about space travel and the universe, as well as focusing the rest of his career on TV shows, educational science programs, in order to get people to put their minds on something outside of the Earth. So I think that he is a great pick, because if we are in contact with aliens for the first time, you don't want to waste that opportunity. You don't want to botch it with miscommunication, and then you never see another alien race again for 2,000 years or something. He is a good pick because he would focus on what we would have to do in order to sustain that relationship as far as astrophysics go, as far as traveling in space goes. He knows a lot about that, so that we could create a plan in order to stay in contact with them in the future, to visit them on their planet, to create some sort of spaceship combining our two technologies. There would have to be really cohesive effort between the two species in order to keep the contact going from that first contact. So I think that that's kind of what I meant by that, bettering humanity, because he's focused his whole career on bettering humanity by expanding our knowledge of the universe in many scientific forms, but as well as his educational pursuits. So that is my expansion on that point.
Got it. Thank you. Jacob, it seems like Noam Chomsky's kind of best quality is his linguistic skill. And so I think Joe and you and Joe were going back and forth on this earlier, and maybe you can expand a little more. But if you operate on the assumption that they're advanced enough to have gotten to us, so surely they can give us a word processor or Microsoft Word, text-to-speech, or something in some way, it should be fairly straightforward and easy for them to communicate with us if they're that advanced. Then why is the focus so much on Noam Chomsky's linguistic skill? Like, why not focus on, if communication is almost a non-issue, then why focus so much on it?
I want to clarify, when I spoke earlier, it wasn't about communication. It was about the means to, I guess, even enter into like earthly language. And what I mean is, like, where Joe was saying they might not have the senses like possible to actually create sound and speak. Well, my point then was that, well, we have ways that you can engage in language without using speech. Technically, you could use a word processor. That would be your way that you could actually experiment and interact with language. Reaching some level of understanding between an earthly language and an extraterrestrial one was not what I was speaking to in that situation. That would be a huge process that would require the linguist, and it'd be very important because language is extremely nuanced. It really is the foundation of everything that needs to come after a first encounter. Your scientists and your astronauts aren't going to have anything to do unless there is an understood code and grammar between the two parties.
I see. And a second quick question for you, Jacob. Your opening statement, you mentioned how preparedness was paramount. But you have not really expanded on Noam's preparedness. So would you care to do that now?
I think he's prepared and he might not even know it. He is a known anarchist. I think that's important because once extraterrestrials reach Earth, all rules are thrown out the window, and we need someone who has been living in the mindset of there being no rules for a very long time. They will be our rock and our foundation in these times of need. Our whole frameworks of thinking will be destroyed, and there will be the select few who have been living in aimless, meaningless life until the aliens arrive, and that's Noam Chomsky. And he's probably the smartest of them all. So that's what I meant by preparedness.
Sounds like an anarchist wouldn't have the good of the rest of the human race in mind.
Oh, I think it's a fundamental misunderstanding of anarchism.
That would be kind of maybe arguable.
It's not against humans; it's against government.
Yeah. Yikes.
Yikes. All right. Thank you, Jacob. Joseph. Oh, you Googled some guy. And
perhaps I made my research seem a little underwhelming, but I swear it was done.
Okay.
With the utmost of...
Well, I'm going to give you a chance to expand here. Everyone else has a
good answer. So what was
Jeez.
Everyone else is focused pretty heavily on communication, and at least in some aspects, communicating through music, communication through a linguist, Neil deGrasse Tyson being a great communicator, and you have not focused on communication at all, really. So do you think it's not important? And if not, then how does Story Musgraves, is that his name?
Yes.
How do the qualities he has, outweigh communication?
Okay. Well, let me start off here by saying Jacob brought up a point about being super intelligent with Noam Chomsky. Story has 7 doctorate degrees in math, computers, chemistry, medicine, physiology, literature, and psychology. So this dude is clearly smart. But you're talking about communication. And yes, I do think communication is important. I brought up my points about how I think that if aliens did reach Earth, they would either already have the capability of communicating with us by having studied us, or number 2, they don't have the sensory capacity to communicate with us in traditional linguistic sense, or number 3, it's just beyond the extent of a linguist's capabilities to learn their language. And in that very small window, maybe you would want a linguist, but I'm trying to prepare for other scenarios here. And so one way that I think that they could communicate would be via images and artwork and that kind of thing. And my boy Story Musgraves is also a concept artist with Walt Disney Imagineering Company. So there's a little fun tidbit for you. This dude could draw up anything he wants to if they have visual sensation. And if they don't, then they don't. And that's just one less thing that we have to communicate with them. But at the end of the day, I think communication will work itself out regardless. But what Story does offer is a few other things. If we were going to interact with these aliens, we want to understand several things about them. We want to understand their technology, their physiology, and those two. And Story is an engineer. He worked as an electrician and an engine mechanic, so he can understand how their technology works in possibly. And number 2, he's a doctor. He's a trauma surgeon, so he can also understand how their physiology works. And I think those two would be important in understanding how they work as a culture. And as a final point, look, if this thing gets hostile, my boy is a Marine. And if we end up having to retreat from that place, I don't want John Williams' decrepit old body to carry back with me. And I don't want Neil deGrasse Tyson, who's a little bit out of shape, to carry either. So I want my boy who's a Marine, an astronaut, 7 degrees, a trauma surgeon, and an engineer.
Okay. I have to say, though, I have grown weary and maybe not weary, but very skeptical of people with 100 degrees and 250 IQs because
oh my gosh,
Jacob once had a person like that and he was completely made up.
Oh my gosh, he's 82, Joe.
He is 82. But
he's 82. He's going to be...
He was born in 1935.
To be fair,
that's the same year as John Williams.
Yeah, well, I'd take an 82-year-old Marine over John Williams any day.
That's a fair point.
And secondly, we said we could take anybody from history, and so I could take him in his peak
but
at
he's also in probably the 10th percentile of all people you want in a combat situation. So
John Williams, yeah.
No, the fittest 82-year-old is like.
Oh yeah, no. But we said we could take anyone from history, so you could back up a few years. I'll take a 40-year-old Story Musgrave.
But you just said that you wouldn't take decrepit old John Williams.
Yeah, so I'll take 40-year-old John Williams, bitch.
I would hardly call Story Musgrave decrepit when he's in shape, you know? But I'm taking 40-year-old. And I would not take 40-year-old John Williams. He would be equally useless to me, other than the music.
Very interesting. I've heard a lot of good stuff. You've made your arguments. You've made your rebuttals. Now everyone has 30 seconds to a minute to give one final pitch to me on why their choice is the best person to meet aliens. So we'll start with a reverse order of opening statements. So Canaan, lead us off.
All right, just picture aliens coming to Earth, all right? We're bringing a meeting party. Are we going to have Noam Chomsky with a word processor, Neil deGrasse Tyson with a presentation set up, or this, I can't even, Story Musgraves, is that it?
Yep.
Whatever this Googled guy is, whatever he has to offer. Or are we going to present them something like worth all of what humanity has accomplished? John Williams with a symphony, bringing in this alien at the very least. It's the coolest thing that ever happened. If everything gets blown up, like it went out, awesome.
With the symphony, you think that's expanding the question a little bit? He would only be able to play whatever instrument he could carry himself.
I mean,
Kanan, what song would he play, though?
Debatable.
Kanan, what song would he play?
He would have to write a new one.
Whoa!
It would have to be completely unheard.
Heard first by alien ears, yeah.
A song to convey all of human history. That would be something
Pretty
to
good,
behold.
Canaan. All right. Big D, I think you're up next.
Okay. So Neil deGrasse Tyson has always had his focus on space and the advancement of science and humanity. He's proved himself as a very, very smart scientist. He's written 14 books in cosmology, black holes, universe, astrophysics. He's awarded 19 honorary doctorates from 19 different colleges. But that all would mean nothing if he wasn't able to communicate well with the aliens. And I think that he's one of the best communicators of our day of complex topics, as well as being charismatic and not a stern person. He can act nice when he needs to in order to avoid conflict with these aliens. He is somebody that I would take with me because he knows a lot of things that I don't know. Yeah, he's not a Marine, so we might not be able to fight a ferocious alien race, but at that point, I think you're kind of screwed either way, especially if it's just you two with any first contact with an alien species. But I think Neil deGrasse would be able to plan the future of humanity with the alien species so that we can maintain that contact into the future and not just have a brief moment of contact that we'll never get to see again.
Very good. Jacob, you're next.
The important part of the prompt is first contact. I think the other two scientists that were brought forward will have to rely on the work of an actual communication expert, someone who's studied it as a science instead of someone who is just good at it and can make a few videos reading some scripts someone else wrote. So that said, it's got to be a linguist, and Noam Chomsky is the best on earth at that. As I spoke about on my earlier point, or I guess my later point in the discussion, the anarchy thing I think is a pretty big deal because I think it automatically qualifies him as a pretty out there guy, and I think while everyone else is freaking out, he'll be the one prepared to answer the call. I don't know. I'm still pretty worked up over Canaan's final statement. I'm a little flustered. I guess just like I'll go head to head with Canaan, but the other two scientists, they would need Noam Chomsky's help. That would therefore make them no longer the first responders.
All right. Big Joe, bring us home.
Me and Story would not need a thing from Noam Chomsky. But I think I've kind of made it clear, at least hopefully, why a linguist would not be as advantageous as movies like Arrival might make you think. But I think one person who hasn't really been targeted here was Neil deGrasse Tyson. No one really said anything bad about him. I think at the end of the day, I mean, he's just an educator and a theoretical physicist. And if aliens do reach Earth, do we really need to explain theoretical physics to them? And I would much rather have someone who's been to space than someone who just studies space from a distance. And I think that would be much more useful. Story Musgraves has a storied career. He is the most experienced with the extraterrestrial in this group, and I think he would be crucial in a variety of different scenarios which you might encounter.
Wait, he has experience with the extraterrestrials already?
No, he has been out of the world.
Oh, with the extraterrestrial.
The extraterrestrial, yes. The outer space.
Okay.
Judge, what say you?
What say you?
Very good arguments. And this is a tough one, as usual. But I have made up my mind.
If you give me fourth again, I might cry.
Well,
Continue the tradition, Jared. Give him fourth.
Fourth place goes to
Don't you dare.
Joe.
Are you serious?
No, I'm kidding. That's a joke. That's a joke. I'm sorry. Big D, you get fourth place.
Oh, what?
Oh, shoot.
Wow.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
surprised.
And here's why. I'll try to justify my answers. For how much emphasis was put on communication, I was not convinced that Neil deGrasse Tyson would be a good communicator with aliens. Like he's good at making hard things sound good in English, but beyond that, I just wasn't convinced he'd be able to communicate well in the same way with aliens. So the rest of it was important, but everyone else made good arguments too. So you land in the fourth spot today. Number 3.
John Williams. John Williams.
Hey, listen.
No, I was just impersonating the Yu-Gi-Oh! Yu-Gi-Oh!
Well, it's about the argument, boys. And actually, let me qualify this next one. So the number 1 is decided. The number 2 and 3 are decided, but, well, whatever. Number 3, Jacob. You had a good argument, all right? You had a good argument, and for how important communication was, you built a really good case. The winner, though, is Joe.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. What? From the bottom
winner
to
is
the top.
Joe, and Canaan and John Williams jumps Jacob for second place. And in this case, maybe this is bad judging, I'm sure, but Joe had my number 1 spot, and Canaan's absolute passion got him the number 2 spot tonight.
All right, well, I'll take that at least.
So Joe got number 1.
I swear you can win Hostel Discourse debates by passion alone.
No, you can't win, but you can get a cool second place.
Cool second.
Slide into a cool set.
Tonight, Joe made the case that well-rounded is what you want. Started off with Renaissance Man, and he did address communication, albeit in a different way. He didn't just let it go, and he had a lot of bases covered. So today, Joe's the winner.
Woo. Joe, this is pretty momentous.
I know.
Do I sense a truce between you and Jared?
For Jared to give me the win is truly
for him to give you anything better than last place.
Yeah. I'm impressed.
Listen, happy. Joe, when you least expect it, it's coming your way again. Okay, so don't get comfortable.
Hey Jared, did you know
rigged.
Did you know that Story Musgraves was made up?
That's not
I looked
true.
him up. He's a real guy.
Okay.
I looked up his website too.
Yeah, he's real.
Once I looked him up, actually, I was even more impressed than when you were talking about him. So
he's a crazy guy.
Yeah, he looks cool.
Okay, First Contact though. Come on, Story. You're gonna put an astronaut up there rather than have John Williams with a virtual symphony.
Yeah.
Virtual symphony.
Yeah, I actually
I'm just saying.
I was rationally convinced of Canaan's argument by the end of this debate, more so than my own.
Yeah, I was definitely emotionally convinced by
honestly, because
Canaan's argument.
If aliens showed up, I put it at about 99% chance that they are just there to kill us, and I think music is our best shot of proving that we are worth not killing in a matter of hours.
And if not, what better way to go out?
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
I love that.
Well, I accept my cool second. Always.
Well,
all right. Well, okay, judging there, Jared. Thanks, I guess.
Okay.
Before we close out the episode, I said that if you left a 5-star review, I would read the most creative one. So we have one review to read on this episode titled, "What Are They Thinking?" 5 stars by Eclectic Ant. With a clever title and a lively format, this podcast is a fascinating, entertaining peek into the worlds of several thoughtful, regular white guys. As a middle-aged female listener, I find the discussions illuminating in regard to the generation, gender, hey, we've had some girls on here, and interests of the hosts and guests. Plus, I love the laughs. It's an enjoyable listen. Keep it up, guys. Okay, this is the kicker. P.S. Jared got robbed in the most American state debate. This had to have been Jared's mom, right?
I told you, boys, the listeners would rise up. I told you they would. And what happened?
Jared had Gabby write it.
Eclectic Ant.
Jared
That's
wrote it
Gabby's
himself.
code name.
Ant, A-N-T.
A-U-N-T.
Oh, that's way less exciting.
The listeners did rise up just as I predicted, and shout out Ann for that rave review.
Correction, the listener.
Yeah.
Listener.
I'll use that as a reminder. Leave a 5-star review on iTunes. It will really help out the show, and we'll read the most creative one on each episode. So, and also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and the schedule's every other Friday. We put out a new episode. So we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you, Canaan, for coming back on the show.
Yay,
Thank you for having me.
It was fun, and thank you, Joe, Jacob, Jared, as always.
Of course.
Yeah.
All right, we will see you later. Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 So long.
Thanks for listening to Hostel Discourse. Subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. And check out our other social media accounts linked in the show notes. Join us next time for more inexhaustible debate over the most questionable of topics.